Just like that, we're already at the final week of the college football season. Every week, I've given my top 10 for the Heisman Trophy. Now, as I've been saying for the last couple of months, it's been one of the more competitive races we've seen in quite some time. But as we enter the final week, there are only 2 or maybe 3 players that still have a legitimate chance of winning the Heisman. But to continue my weekly trend, here is my top 10 Heisman rankings before we enter the final week of the college football season. Before we get to today's video, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. I'll be posting college football videos every day to close out the season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. Like I mentioned, there are only 2 players who I think are still in the running for the Heisman Trophy, but there are 4 players overall who I haven't eliminated entirely. Kicking off our rankings at number 10 is Clemson quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. He's having by far the best season of his career as he's thrown for 2,400 yards with 21 passing touchdowns. He's also added 500 yards on the ground with 6 rushing scores as well. After a disastrous sophomore campaign in 2021, Uiagalelei has really turned things around in 2022. If it wasn't for Clemson's loss a few weeks ago to Notre Dame, this would be an undefeated Tigers team, and I think that he would have a much greater chance of winning the Heisman. Still, he's really bounced back nicely after last season and has put up some of the best numbers of any quarterback in college football. After back-to-back losses, his chances have taken a significant hit, but it's still been a remarkable season for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. In year 5, DTR is having the best season of his career. He's completing 69.8% of his passes and has thrown for 2,700 yards. He's also thrown a career-high 24 passing touchdowns. Meanwhile, on the ground, he's rushed for 550 yards with 9 rushing scores. He did everything he could this past weekend in UCLA's close loss to USC. He threw for over 300 yards with 4 passing touchdowns while rushing for 80 yards and 2 scores. But unfortunately, he just couldn't do quite enough to get UCLA the win. Drake May had his worst game of the season this past weekend, but his 2022 campaign has been incredible. He's completing 69% of his passes and has thrown for 3,600 yards with 34 passing touchdowns. He's also rushed for 600 yards with 5 rushing scores. He leads the ACC in pass completions, pass completion percentage, passing yards, and passing touchdowns. He's also number 3 in the country in passing yards and passing touchdowns respectively. Overall though, his 4,200 total yards leads all of college football. Like I mentioned, he had his worst game of the season this past weekend, but when looking at his year as a whole, he's been fantastic. Unfortunately, Hendon Hooker's season came to an end this weekend as he suffered a season-ending ACL injury. So Hooker's going to finish his season completing 69% of his passes. He threw for a career best 3,100 yards and threw 27 passing touchdowns with only 2 interceptions. He also added 430 yards on the ground with 5 rushing scores. Hooker led the SEC in pass completion percentage and passing yards per attempt. He also leads the SEC in touchdowns responsible for and total yards. Although Tennessee lost to South Carolina this past weekend, Hooker still threw for 250 yards with 3 passing touchdowns. Losing 2 of their last 3 games definitely hurt, along with him being ruled out for the rest of the season. But still, it was a remarkable season for Hendon Hooker and Tennessee. After transferring from Arizona State, Jaden Daniels has been fantastic for LSU. He's thrown for 2,400 yards and has 15 passing touchdowns with only 2 interceptions. He's also completing 70% of his passes. Daniels has also rushed for 740 yards with 11 rushing scores. He got off to kind of a slow start, but what he's done over the past month for LSU has been fantastic. Against Florida, he had 6 touchdowns and 400 total yards. Then against Ole Miss, he had nearly 400 yards again with 5 touchdowns. Then against Alabama, he totaled 300 yards with 3 total touchdowns. This past weekend in a quiet win over UAB, Daniels once again topped 400 yards with 2 touchdowns. I really wanted Bo Nix to have a legitimate chance at the Heisman Trophy, but the fact that he's likely going to finish top 5 is more than enough for me. Through 11 games this season, Bo Nix is completing 72% of his passes, the best mark in the entire country. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards for the first time in his entire career. His 25 passing touchdowns are also a career high as well. In addition, Nix has added 500 yards on the ground while rushing for more than 6 yards a carry with 14 rushing scores. For good measure, he's also caught 2 passes for a touchdown as well. Overall, Bo Nix is number 2 in the entire country with 40 total touchdowns. His 3,600 yards are number 8 as well. Even though he put up solid numbers a couple weeks ago, Oregon's loss to Washington pretty much ended his chances of winning the Heisman. He still has a chance to finish the season strong and build some momentum, but barring absolute chaos, I just don't think Bo Nix stands a chance anymore. But like I mentioned, if he finishes top 5 in voting, that's a win for me. TCU quarterback Max Duggan is one of 4 players who I think is still alive in the Heisman hunt, but a lot is going to have to go his way in order to win the award. For TCU, he's thrown for 2,900 yards with 26 passing touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. He's also rushed for 300 yards with 5 rushing scores. Duggan has been one of the top quarterbacks in all of college football this season, and TCU is still undefeated, which will definitely give him a boost. If Duggan is able to win the next 2 games and help TCU finish the season undefeated and send them to the college football playoff while putting up some solid numbers, like I said, I still think he has an outside shot of winning the Heisman. Blake Corum is also another player who I think is still alive in the hunt. With Michigan undefeated and ranked number 3, if the Wolverines can beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten, then I think he'll have a strong case. On the season, Corum has rushed for 1,500 yards while averaging 6 yards a carry. He's also rushed in 18 touchdowns on the ground. His 19 touchdowns from scrimmage lead the entire country, and his 1,500 yards from scrimmage are number 6 in the nation as well. Even though Corum was hurt this past weekend against Illinois, he still rushed for over 100 yards and had a rushing score. He also caught 2 passes for a season-high 40 receiving yards. If Corum's healthy enough to go this weekend against Ohio State and he has a strong performance and Michigan pulls off the victory, he's pretty much going to lock up his spot as a Heisman finalist. But we're at my final 2, and these are the 2 players who I think are going to battle it out in these next few weeks for the Heisman Award. But at number 2 is Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud. He's been fantastic this season as he's thrown for 3,000 yards with 35 passing touchdowns. But the reason I have him at number 2 is just the fact that over the last month, he hasn't been all that good. Against Penn State, he threw only 1 touchdown pass. Then against Northwestern, he completed 38% of his passes for 76 yards with no touchdowns. He had a solid showing last week against Indiana as he threw 5 touchdown passes. But this past weekend on the road at Maryland, Stroud threw for only 240 yards with 1 passing touchdown. I get it, Ohio State's been winning these games and his numbers haven't been awful, but the player I have at number 1 has just been better overall this past month, and that's why I have him in the number 1 spot. So my current favorite for the Heisman Trophy is USC quarterback Caleb Williams. Overall for the season, he's thrown for 3,500 yards with 33 passing touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. He's also rushed for 300 yards with 7 rushing scores. His 3,800 yards are the 5th most in the entire country, and his 40 total touchdowns are tied for the 2nd most. His numbers are near the top, but what he's done over the past month is what's put him in the number 1 spot for me. If you go back over a month ago, USC lost to Utah on the road, but Williams threw for 400 yards with 5 passing touchdowns. Then against Arizona, he threw for 400 yards with 5 passing touchdowns again. Against Cal, he threw for 360 yards with 4 passing touchdowns while rushing in a touchdown with 40 yards. Then against Colorado, he threw for 300 yards with 3 passing touchdowns while rushing in 2 touchdowns as well. Then this past weekend, in the biggest game of the season for the Trojans, he threw for 470 yards with 2 passing touchdowns while rushing for 30 yards with a rushing score. He's been playing his best ball over the last month, and that's why I have him as the slight edge over CJ Stroud. Whatever happens over the next 2 weeks is probably going to determine who wins the Heisman Trophy. Caleb Williams has Notre Dame and likely Oregon left on his schedule, whereas CJ Stroud has Michigan and whoever they face in the Big Ten title game. For right now, I give the slight edge to Caleb Williams, but like I said, I think it all comes down to how these 2 quarterbacks fare over the final 2 weeks of the season. Well, those are the 10 players I currently have in my Heisman race. Like I mentioned, I think it's down to 2 players, with 2 players still having an outside shot. What are your thoughts on my top 5 or my top 10 as a whole? Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you leave, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you love college football, this is definitely the place for you. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm posting videos every day throughout the rest of the season, so make sure to subscribe if you call yourself a college football fan. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.